Thomas Brennan's hands were shaking as he pinned the Medal of Valor to his dress uniform. Not from nerves, from guilt. The medal ceremony was scheduled for June 14, 2024, 2 days from now. 300 people would gather at Lakewood Community Center to honor Fire Chief Thomas Brennan for 40 years of service. The mayor would speak. The governor might attend. Brennan's wife and daughters would sit in the front row, proud. Kyle Mitchell, whose wife Brennan had murdered 39 years ago, might even be there. He attended most community events, a ghost moving through Lakewood's social calendar, never remarrying, never moving on, still waiting for answers about what happened to Lauren. Brennan stared at his reflection in the bedroom mirror. 63 years old. Gray hair. Lines carved deep around his eyes from decades of smoke and sun and the weight of secrets. The medal looked wrong, pinned to his chest. A lie made of metal. He'd saved lives, that was true. Pulled children from burning buildings. Performed CPR on heart attack victims. Risked his life 100 times to protect people who trusted him. But none of that balanced what he'd done to Lauren Mitchell on a June night in 1985 when she threatened to tell her husband about their affair, and he'd panicked and killed her. The medal ceremony would never happen. Because at exactly 6:47 a.m. on June 12, 2024, Detective Rachel Martinez was standing outside Brennan's house with 6 tactical officers, a DNA match report in her hand, and an arrest warrant that would destroy everything Brennan had spent 39 years building. Brennan emerged from his house in full fire department uniform, coffee mug in hand, completely unaware that forensic genetic genealogy had just connected him to blood found on Lauren Mitchell's car seat. Blood that contained his DNA mixed with hers. Blood he'd told investigators in 1985 came from a cut he got while helping search for her body. A lie that had held for 39 years. Until science caught up, he saw the vehicles first. 3 unmarked sedans, officers emerging, moving with the deliberate precision of predators closing in. Brennan froze on his front porch, confusion flickering across his weathered face. "Can I help you?" he called out, still holding his coffee, still wearing the uniform that had earned him respect across Wisconsin. Detective Martinez stepped forward, badge held high. "Thomas Brennan, you're under arrest for the murder of Lauren Mitchell." The coffee mug slipped from his hand. It hit the concrete porch and exploded, ceramic shards scattering, liquid spreading like the blood he'd washed from his hands 39 years ago. Brennan's legs buckled. He grabbed the porch railing, white-knuckled, gasping. "No," he whispered. Then louder, voice cracking with panic and something that sounded like relief. "Lauren, God, no, not Lauren, not after all this time." He tried to back toward the door. Officer Marcus Chen moved faster, catching Brennan's arm. "Don't make this harder, Chief." Brennan looked down at his uniform, at the fire department badge he'd worn for 4 decades, at the commendation ribbons representing dozens of lives saved. His hands started trembling violently. "You don't understand. I tried to make it right. I spent 39 years trying to make it right. Turn around, hands behind your back." As officers secured the handcuffs, something fell from Brennan's shirt pocket. A photograph, edges worn from years of handling, fluttered to the porch. Martinez picked it up. Her breath caught. Lauren Mitchell in her wedding dress, standing outside St. Mary's Church, June 5, 1985. 19 years old. Blonde hair. Radiant smile. 3 days before Thomas Brennan killed her. Martinez flipped the photo over. On the back, in Brennan's handwriting, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to end this way." She looked up at Brennan, rage and disgust warring in her expression. "You've been carrying her wedding photo for 39 years." Brennan's face crumpled. Tears and mucus streamed down his cheeks. "I see her face every night. Every single night. I thought if I saved enough lives, maybe somehow it would balance out. Maybe she'd forgive me." She was 19 years old. She's not forgiving anyone. She's dead. Across the street, neighbors began emerging. Mrs. Patterson, who Brennan had helped evacuate during the 2019 flood. The Reynolds family, whose 3 children Brennan had pulled from a burning house in 2015, the incident that earned him the Medal of Valor. The Johnsons, who'd hosted Brennan's family for Christmas dinner every year for a decade. They watched in stunned silence as their hero, handcuffed and sobbing, was guided toward a patrol car. "Chief Brennan?" Mrs. Patterson called out, voice shaking. "Tom, what's happening? Tell them there's a mistake." Brennan looked at her, then at the gathered neighbors, then at his house where his wife Patricia was probably still sleeping, unaware that her husband of 37 years was a murderer. "There's no mistake," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to all of you." As the patrol car door closed, Brennan collapsed forward, forehead hitting the metal grate separating front seat from back, and the sound that came from his throat was raw and animal. Not the sound of an innocent man wrongly accused, the sound of a guilty man who'd carried his secret for 39 years and finally, impossibly, been caught. By 7:30 that morning, Lakewood, Wisconsin, population 8,400, nestled on the shores of Lake Winnebago, was waking to news that would shatter 39 years of trust and redefine what it meant to know someone. To understand how Thomas Brennan, decorated fire chief and hero to thousands, lived free for nearly 4 decades while Lauren Mitchell's family waited for answers, you have to go back to a June night in 1985, when Lakewood was a place where everyone knew everyone, and evil wore a uniform and a smile. Lauren Ann Mitchell was 19 years old and 3 days married when she disappeared. Her wedding to Kyle Mitchell on June 5, 1985, had been small but perfect. 70 guests at St. Mary's Church, modest reception in the church basement. They'd graduated from Lakewood High School together in 1984. He was working at his father's hardware store. She was waitressing at Murphy's Diner while taking night classes at community college. They were young, broke, in love, and optimistic about a future that would be stolen from them 72 hours after they said their vows. June 8th was a Saturday. Lauren worked the evening shift at Murphy's Diner, 6 p.m. to midnight. Kyle was supposed to pick her up after work, but his father called with an emergency plumbing issue at the hardware store. Lauren told her manager she'd drive herself home. At 12:17 a.m., she clocked out. Multiple witnesses saw her walk to her car, a blue 1979 Honda Civic parked in the diner's side lot. She was wearing her waitress uniform, carrying tips in her apron pocket, probably thinking about her new husband and the life they were building together. That was the last time anyone who loved Lauren saw her alive. At 1:30 a.m., Kyle Mitchell arrived home to their apartment above the hardware store to find Lauren wasn't there. He called the diner. Manager said she'd left over an hour ago. Panic started creeping in, cold and visceral. Kyle called Lauren's parents. Not there. He drove the route between the diner and their apartment 3 times, hands shaking on the steering wheel, breath coming faster. Nothing. At 2:15 a.m., when fear became certainty that something was wrong, he called Lakewood Police Department. Officer David Chen responded. At 19 and newly married, Lauren didn't fit profiles for runaways or voluntary disappearances. Chen began checking routes Lauren would have taken. At 3:42 a.m., he found her Honda Civic parked at Cedar Point Lake Access, a small public beach 2 miles from town. The car was unlocked, keys still in the ignition, engine cold. Lauren's purse sat on the passenger seat, wallet inside with her ID and $23. Her waitress apron was folded neatly on the back seat, tips still in the pocket. Everything Lauren owned was accounted for, except Lauren. Chen called for backup. By 4 a.m., every available officer was at Cedar Point Lake. By dawn, volunteers from Lakewood Fire Department arrived to help search. Among them, 24-year-old Thomas Brennan, a firefighter who joined the department 3 years earlier and was already building a reputation for dedication and bravery. Brennan worked the search with intensity that impressed everyone present, diving into the lake, checking the shoreline, organizing volunteer groups. When Kyle Mitchell arrived at the scene, devastated and desperate, it was Brennan who put a hand on his shoulder and made a promise he knew was a lie. "We'll find her, Kyle. I promise you. We'll find her." Kyle, barely 20 years old, 3 days married, looked at the young firefighter with gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on her." Brennan met his eyes and nodded, knowing exactly where Lauren was. Knowing she was at the bottom of Cedar Point Lake, weighted down with a cement block, put there by his own hands hours earlier, when she'd threatened to tell Kyle about their affair, and Brennan had panicked and killed her. The search continued for weeks. Divers covered Cedar Point Lake methodically. Search dogs tracked Lauren's scent from her car to the water's edge, then lost it. Helicopters flew grid patterns. Volunteers walked every trail, checked every building, knocked on every door within 10 miles. Lauren Mitchell had vanished, and Thomas Brennan, the firefighter who'd helped lead the search, attended every briefing, coordinated every dive team, and knew the entire time they'd never find her. Not without draining the lake, not without equipment that didn't exist in 1985. The investigation that followed consumed Lakewood for months. Lead detective was Walter Hayes, a 20-year veteran who'd worked dozens of missing persons cases, but never one this perplexing. The evidence pointed in every direction and nowhere. Lauren's car at the lake suggested suicide or abduction, but her purse was untouched. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, no body. Hayes focused early investigation on Kyle Mitchell. Statistics showed most violence against women came from intimate partners. Kyle and Lauren had been married 3 days. Happy newlyweds or couple in crisis? Kyle insisted everything was perfect. Friends confirmed they seemed happy. Financial records showed no unusual activity. And Kyle's alibi for the crucial hours was airtight. He'd been at the hardware store with his father from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., confirmed by timestamps on the store's receipt printer and his father's testimony. The investigation expanded. Had Lauren been followed from the diner? No witnesses reported suspicious activity. Did she have enemies? Jealous ex-boyfriends? Everyone interviewed described Lauren as sweet, friendly, well-liked, the kind of girl everyone loved. One detail troubled Detective Hayes: a small blood stain on the driver's seat of Lauren's Honda. Lab analysis determined it was type A positive, Lauren's blood type. But the stain contained trace amounts of a second person's blood, too degraded for 1985 technology to type. Hayes theorized Lauren had struggled with someone, perhaps scratching them, getting their blood mixed with her own. But without advanced DNA analysis, the sample was useless for identifying suspects. Among those interviewed, Thomas Brennan, the firefighter who'd helped coordinate the search. Brennan reported a cut on his hand from searching near the rocky shoreline of Cedar Point Lake. The cut matched the blood type found in Lauren's car, type A positive, shared by 34% of the population. Hayes noted it in the file, but had no reason to suspect a dedicated young firefighter who'd worked tirelessly to find Lauren. By December 1985, the investigation stalled. Lauren's family held a memorial service on what would have been her 20th birthday. Kyle Mitchell, barely holding himself together, spoke about the girl he'd loved since 8th grade, married for 3 days, and would miss forever. Among the mourners, Thomas Brennan, in his dress uniform, head bowed, apparently grieving alongside everyone else, while knowing exactly what had happened to Lauren, and choosing every day to let Kyle suffer rather than confess. The memorial became an annual tradition. Every June 8th, Lauren's family and friends gathered at Cedar Point Lake to remember her, to keep her memory alive, to hope for answers that never came. And every year, Without fail, for 39 years, Thomas Brennan attended, standing quietly at the back, head bowed, sometimes speaking to Kyle, offering hollow comfort, playing the role of concerned community member while knowing the woman they were remembering was directly beneath their feet, at the bottom of the lake, put there by his hands. For Kyle Mitchell, Lauren's disappearance destroyed every future he'd imagined. He continued working at his father's hardware store, but friends said he became a ghost, going through motions without presence. He never remarried, never dated, never moved from the apartment he'd shared with Lauren for 3 days. He slept on the same side of the bed, kept her coffee mug in the cupboard, set 2 places at the table for dinner, because 39 years wasn't long enough to break habits formed in 72 hours of marriage. Kyle's parents, Richard and Susan Mitchell, channeled their grief into action. They established the Lauren Mitchell Fund, providing resources for search efforts and supporting families dealing with missing persons cases. Over 39 years, the fund helped dozens of investigations. But Lauren's case remained frozen, a wound that never healed. Thomas Brennan, meanwhile, built a life and career on the foundation of murder. He married Patricia in 1987, a nurse at Lakewood Hospital, who had no idea the kind man she loved had killed a young bride 2 years earlier. They had 2 daughters. Both grew up proud of their father, the firefighter, the hero who saved lives. Brennan rose through ranks, lieutenant in 1992, captain in 1998, fire chief in 2007. He earned commendations, was featured in newspapers, spoke at schools about fire safety, became the kind of public figure small towns rally around. In 2015, Brennan ran into a burning house to save 3 children trapped on the 2nd floor. The rescue was captured on news helicopters. The footage went viral. Brennan's face, covered in soot, carrying a 6-year-old girl to safety, became the image of heroism. The governor of Wisconsin personally presented him with the Medal of Valor at a ceremony attended by hundreds. Kyle Mitchell watched the ceremony on television from his apartment, alone, still waiting for information about the wife who'd been missing for 30 years, while her killer received medals for bravery. At the 2015 medal ceremony, Brennan gave a speech about duty and service. "Every life matters," he said, voice thick with emotion that seemed genuine. "Every person we save is someone's daughter, someone's father, someone's loved one. We can't bring everyone home, but we never stop trying." The audience gave him a standing ovation. Kyle Mitchell turned off the television and sat in silence, not knowing that the man speaking about saving lives had murdered his wife and let him suffer for 3 decades. In 2020, at the 35th anniversary memorial for Lauren, Brennan stood beside Kyle at Cedar Point Lake. The pandemic had reduced attendance, but the core group remained. As they stood by the memorial plaque, Brennan put his hand on Kyle's shoulder. "I think about her often," Brennan said quietly. "About what might have happened, about whether we missed something in the search." Kyle, now 55 years old, gray-haired and hollow-eyed, looked at the fire chief who'd helped search for Lauren 35 years earlier. "You've been good to attend these all these years, Tom. Most people forgot about Lauren. But you never did." Brennan squeezed Kyle's shoulder, unable to meet his eyes. "She deserves to be remembered. She deserves justice." The words were true. They were also torture. Because Brennan knew Lauren would never get justice. He'd made sure of that when he weighted her body with a cement block and sunk her in the lake they were standing beside. When he'd attended 35 consecutive memorials, watching Kyle's life disintegrate while building his own reputation as a hero. When he'd made a choice, every single day for 39 years, to let an innocent man suffer rather than confess what he'd done. The breakthrough that would finally destroy Brennan's carefully constructed facade began in 2022 when Lakewood Police Department hired Maria Santos as chief. Santos had worked homicide in Milwaukee for 15 years before returning to her hometown, determined to bring modern investigative techniques to rural law enforcement. One of her first actions, reviewing cold cases with potential for DNA analysis. Lauren Mitchell's file was thick with reports, but thin on leads. Among preserved evidence, swabs taken from Lauren's car in 1985, the driver's seat bloodstain, identified as containing Lauren's blood, mixed with trace amounts of foreign DNA. In 1985, that DNA was useless. In 2023, it was everything. Santos sent samples to a private forensic lab specializing in cold cases. Using modern extraction techniques designed for degraded samples, the lab recovered a partial DNA profile from cells in the bloodstain. The profile was entered into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system. No match. But in March 2024, the lab tried a newer approach, forensic genetic genealogy. The DNA profile was uploaded to GED Match, a public ancestry database. Within weeks, the genealogy search identified family connections through distant relatives who'd submitted their DNA. The trail led to a Wisconsin family line. 3 brothers, born in the 1950s and 60s. 1 deceased, 2 alive, both living in Lakewood. 1 was a retired postal worker. The other was fire chief. On May 15, 2024, Detective Rachel Martinez received the genealogy report in her office. She read the name 3 times, unable to process what she was seeing. Thomas Edward Brennan, Fire Chief Brennan, Medal of Valor recipient, community hero, the man who'd helped search for Lauren Mitchell, who'd attended every memorial, who'd comforted Kyle Mitchell at dozens of vigils. The idea seemed impossible. But DNA doesn't make mistakes. Martinez contacted Chief Santos. They couldn't arrest Brennan based on genealogy alone. They needed direct DNA confirmation. For the next 4 weeks, investigators tracked Brennan's movements, waiting for an opportunity to collect discarded DNA legally. On June 6, 2024, Brennan attended a department meeting at fire station headquarters. After the meeting, he threw away a disposable coffee cup in the break room trash. Officers retrieved it, sent it for expedited analysis. On June 10th, results came back. Perfect match to the DNA from Lauren Mitchell's car 39 years earlier. Thomas Brennan had been in Lauren's car. His blood was mixed with hers. The cut on his hand he'd claimed came from searching the rocky shoreline had come from Lauren Mitchell's fingernails as she fought for her life. The arrest warrant was signed June 11th. The tactical plan was simple. Take Brennan into custody at his home early morning, before the medal ceremony. Minimize media circus. On June 12th, 2024, at exactly 6:47 a.m., Detective Martinez and 6 officers approached Thomas Brennan's house, and when the coffee mug shattered on the porch, when Brennan whispered Lauren's name with guilt and relief, when officers found her wedding photo in his pocket, Martinez knew they had their man. As the patrol car carrying Brennan pulled away, neighbors who'd trusted him for decades stood in shocked silence. The ceremony scheduled for June 14th was canceled. The medal for 40 years of service was never presented. Because Thomas Brennan, decorated fire chief and hero to thousands, was a murderer who'd hidden his crime for 39 years while attending memorials and comforting his victim's husband. And now, finally, Lauren Mitchell's family would get the answers they'd waited nearly 4 decades to hear. But for Kyle Mitchell, the truth would be more devastating than 39 years of not knowing, because he'd learned that the man who'd promised to never give up searching for Lauren, the man who'd attended every memorial, was the man who'd killed her. And Kyle would have to live with that knowledge for whatever time remained. The interrogation room at Wisconsin State Police headquarters was designed to break people. Gray concrete walls, single metal table bolted to the floor, 2 uncomfortable chairs, fluorescent lights that hummed constantly, designed to induce headaches and anxiety. No windows. No clock. Just Thomas Brennan in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed to a steel ring embedded in the table, and Detective Rachel Martinez sitting across from him with a folder containing 39 years of evidence. Brennan had been in custody for 8 hours, booked, photographed, fingerprinted, strip-searched. The transformation from decorated fire chief to inmate had been brutally efficient. Now he sat slumped in the chair, face pale, eyes red and swollen from crying, looking 20 years older than the man who'd been preparing for a medal ceremony that morning. Martinez let the silence stretch. 5 minutes. 10. 15. She'd learned that silence was often more effective than questions. Let suspects sit with their guilt. Let them imagine what evidence existed. Let them talk themselves into confessions. At 17 minutes, Brennan broke. "How did you find me?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Martinez opened the folder slowly, pulled out the DNA report, slid it across the table. Forensic genetic genealogy. Your second cousin uploaded their DNA to an ancestry website in 2021. They had no idea they were identifying a murderer. Brennan stared at the document, hands trembling. 39 years. I thought the blood in her car was too degraded, too old, too mixed with hers to ever identify. Science doesn't stop advancing, Mr. Brennan. The blood you told investigators came from searching the rocky shoreline. That was your blood mixed with Lauren's, from her fingernails, from when she fought you. Brennan's face crumpled. He pressed his cuffed hands against his eyes. She fought so hard. I didn't expect that. She was small, but she fought like hell. Martinez leaned forward. Tell me what happened. Tell me about Lauren Mitchell. The confession came in fragments, between sobs and long silences, when Brennan seemed to be reliving moments he'd spent 39 years trying to forget. It started 6 months before Lauren's wedding, he said. He was 24, a young firefighter. She was 18, waitressing at Murphy's Diner, where Brennan ate breakfast most mornings before his shift. She was beautiful, friendly. She'd refill my coffee without me asking. Remember how I liked my eggs. I started going there every day. Not for the food. To see her. The affair began in February 1985, 4 months before Lauren married Kyle. Brennan claimed Lauren initiated it, though Martinez's expression made clear she didn't believe that version. They met in secret. His apartment. Her car parked at Cedar Point Lake, where no one would recognize it. Lauren told him it was just physical, that she loved Kyle, that it would end when she got married. I thought I was fine with that, Brennan said. But when the wedding happened, when I saw her marry Kyle, something inside me broke. I couldn't let her go. After the wedding, Lauren tried to end it. Brennan kept showing up at the diner, calling her at work, following her home. On June 8, 1985, 3 days after Lauren's wedding, Brennan waited in the Murphy's Diner parking lot until her shift ended at midnight. I just wanted to talk to her, to convince her we could make it work. But she got angry. Said she'd tell Kyle everything if I didn't leave her alone. Said I was stalking her, that she'd file a restraining order. Brennan followed Lauren's car to Cedar Point Lake. She pulled into the access lot, probably hoping a public place would keep him calm. She was wrong. I got in her car, passenger side, started begging her not to tell Kyle. She tried to push me out, started screaming. I grabbed her, put my hand over her mouth. She bit me, hard, drew blood. Then she scratched my face, my hands, fighting to get away. Martinez's jaw tightened. And then? I panicked. I grabbed her from behind, put my arm around her neck, squeezed. I just wanted her to stop screaming. But I squeezed too hard, for too long. When I let go, she wasn't breathing. The room fell silent except for the fluorescent lights humming and Brennan's ragged breathing. Martinez forced herself to remain professional, when every instinct screamed to reach across the table and finish what Lauren had started 39 years ago. "What did you do with her body?" Brennan's voice dropped to barely audible. "I had tools in my truck. I'm a firefighter. I always have rope, equipment. There was a cement block at the lake access, part of an old boat ramp they'd demolished. I tied it to her waist, wrapped her in a tarp from my truck, rowed her out to the deepest part of the lake in a boat I found tied to the dock. You sank her in Cedar Point Lake, the same lake you helped search, the same lake where you stood at memorials for 39 years. Brennan nodded, tears streaming. "I couldn't leave town. That would have been suspicious. So I stayed. I joined the search. I attended memorials. I watched Kyle suffer. And every year, standing at that lake, I knew Lauren was directly beneath us." Martinez stood abruptly, walked to the corner, pressed her palms against the cold concrete wall. When she turned back, her voice was ice. "You stood beside Kyle Mitchell at 39 memorials. You put your hand on his shoulder. You told him she deserved justice, and you knew the whole time. I thought if I saved enough lives, if I became a good person, maybe somehow it would balance out. I saved 3 kids from a burning house in 2015, got the Medal of Valor, and all I could think was that Lauren would never have kids, would never grow old, because of me. That's not atonement. That's cowardice. You tortured Kyle Mitchell for 39 years because you were too weak to confess." Brennan looked up, face destroyed by guilt and something like relief. "I know. I've known for 39 years, and now it's over. Finally, it's over." While Brennan sat in the interrogation room confessing, a tactical team was executing a search warrant at his house on Maple Street. Patricia Brennan, his wife of 37 years, stood on the lawn in her bathrobe, demanding to know what was happening. A family liaison officer tried to explain, but Patricia's screams drowned out every word. "My husband is fire chief. He saves lives. There's been a terrible mistake." Inside the house, investigators moved through each room systematically. The living room was filled with commendations, photos of Brennan in uniform, newspaper clippings about rescues he'd performed. The bedroom was ordinary, revealing nothing. But in Brennan's home office, in a locked drawer of his desk, Detective Sarah Chen found what they were looking for: a shoebox. Inside, letters, dozens of them, written on diner receipt paper, napkins, notebook pages. Love letters from Lauren to Brennan, dated between February and May 1985. Each signed L with a small heart, each expressing affection that would have destroyed her marriage if Kyle had ever found them. Beneath the letters, photographs. Lauren and Brennan together, her sitting in his lap, him kissing her neck, her laughing at something he'd said, all taken at his apartment or in his truck, evidence of an affair that had ended with murder. At the bottom of the box, a journal, leather-bound, Brennan's handwriting. Chen opened to the first entry, dated June 9th, 1985, one day after Lauren's death. "I killed Lauren last night. I never meant to hurt her. I loved her. But she was going to tell Kyle about us, and I panicked. I put her in the lake. I don't know how to live with this. The only way forward is to make sure she's never forgotten. I'll help find her. I'll attend her memorials. I'll dedicate my life to saving others. Maybe that will be enough. Maybe God will forgive me." The entries continued, sporadic but persistent, spanning 39 years. Brennan documenting every memorial he attended, every conversation with Kyle, every life he saved as a firefighter, each entry ending with the same refrain: "Maybe this will be enough. Maybe she'll forgive me." The final entry was dated June 11th, 2024, one day before his arrest. "I saw police watching me at the fire station yesterday. I know they're close. Part of me wants to run. But mostly, I'm just tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of carrying this weight. tired of looking at Kyle and knowing what I've done to him. If they arrest me, maybe that's mercy. Maybe 39 years of hiding is long enough. Maybe it's time to tell the truth. Lauren deserves that. Kyle deserves that. I'm sorry, Lauren. I'm so sorry. Chen photographed every page, her hands shaking with rage. When she emerged from the house with the evidence box, Patricia Brennan was still on the lawn, now sitting in a patrol car, face buried in her hands. An officer had finally told her why her husband was being arrested. Her reaction, recorded on body camera, would later be shown in court. No. Tom wouldn't hurt anyone. He saves people. That's what he does. He saves people. But the evidence said otherwise. And when Patricia was shown the letters, the photos, the journal, she collapsed. The man she'd been married to for 37 years, the father of her children, the community hero, was a stranger who'd murdered his mistress and let her husband suffer for 4 decades. The recovery operation at Cedar Point Lake began at dawn on June 15, 2024, guided by Brennan's confession. The lake was closed to public access. Dive teams from 3 counties assembled. Media trucks lined the access road, cameras recording everything. And at the water's edge, barely holding himself upright, stood Kyle Mitchell. Detective Martinez had called him 2 days earlier with news of Brennan's arrest. Kyle's reaction had been silence, complete, devastating silence. Then, finally, Tom Brennan? The fire chief? The man who helped search for her? Now Kyle stood at the lake where Lauren's car had been found 39 years ago, where he'd attended 39 memorials, where Brennan had stood beside him promising they'd find her, stood above the water where his wife had been for 4 decades. Sheriff Maria Santos approached, placed a hand on Kyle's shoulder. You don't have to be here for this, Kyle. It could take days to recover her. Kyle shook his head. I've been waiting 39 years. I'm not leaving now. The dive teams entered the water at 7:12 a.m. Brennan had described the location with precision, northeast corner of the lake, approximately 300 yards from shore, in the deepest section where the old quarry had been before it flooded in the 1960s. The water was 40 feet deep there. Cold. Dark. Visibility less than 5 feet. It took 4 hours. At 11:23 a.m., a diver surfaced, gave the signal. They'd found something. Recovery took another 3 hours. Slow, methodical, documenting everything. When they finally brought the remains to the surface, wrapped in the deteriorated tarp, still attached to the cement block, Kyle Mitchell's legs gave out. Santos caught him, helped him to a bench, held the 58-year-old man while he wept for the girl he'd married at 19, lost at 19, and finally found at 58. She was there the whole time, Kyle gasped between sobs. Every memorial, every time I stood at this lake begging God for answers. She was right there. And Tom Brennan knew. He stood next to me. He told me not to give up hope. And he knew. The medical examiner confirmed the remains were consistent with a female in her late teens, cause of death consistent with strangulation. Dental records would provide final identification, but everyone knew. Lauren Mitchell had been found. The news exploded across Wisconsin, and then nationally. Fire chief arrested. Victim's body recovered from lake after 39 years. Killer attended memorials, comforted victim's husband, received Medal of Valor. The story had everything that made true crime simultaneously compelling and horrifying. In Lakewood, the reaction was visceral. The fire station where Brennan had worked for 40 years was surrounded by protesters. Some demanding answers, others defending Brennan, insisting evidence must be wrong, that their hero couldn't possibly be a murderer. But as details emerged, as the affair became public knowledge, as Brennan's confession was reported, even his staunchest defenders fell silent. Patricia Brennan filed for divorce on June 20, 2024. Their 2 daughters, both in their 30s, released a statement through an attorney. "We are devastated. The man we knew as our father doesn't exist. We stand with Lauren Mitchell's family. We pray Kyle Mitchell finds peace." At Lakewood Fire Department, an emergency meeting was held. 40 firefighters, many who'd worked under Brennan for decades, gathered in the station common room. Chief Santos, who'd taken over after Brennan's arrest, addressed them. "I know many of you looked up to Tom Brennan. He was a good firefighter. He saved lives. But he also took a life. And he let an innocent man suffer for 39 years. Those 2 things can't be reconciled. We'll remember the lives he saved, but we'll also remember what he did to Lauren Mitchell and Kyle Mitchell." The station's wall of honor, where Brennan's photo had hung for 17 years as fire chief, was taken down. The Medal of Valor plaque was removed. The Thomas Brennan Community Service Award, established in his honor in 2018, was renamed the Lakewood Fire Department Service Award. His name was erased from the building, from the website, from everything. As if 40 years of service could be deleted by 39 years of lies. Lauren Mitchell's funeral was held on July 8, 2024, at St. Mary's Church, the same church where she'd married Kyle 39 years earlier. The church overflowed with mourners, some who'd known Lauren, others who'd grown up hearing her story. All gathered to finally lay her to rest. Kyle sat in the front pew, the same pew where he'd sat for their wedding in 1985. He was 58 now, gray-haired, exhausted. He'd asked to speak during the service, despite everyone advising against it. When Pastor David Michaels called him forward, Kyle walked to the pulpit slowly, gripping it with white-knuckled hands. "Lauren was 19 when she disappeared," Kyle said, voice shaking. "We'd been married 3 days. I spent 39 years believing she'd been taken by a stranger, by someone evil who we'd never identify. I made peace with that. But learning that Tom Brennan, the fire chief who helped search for her, who attended every memorial, who put his hand on my shoulder and told me we'd find her, that he was the one who killed her." Kyle's voice broke. "That's a betrayal I can't process. He saved 3 kids from a fire in 2015, got the Medal of Valor. I watched that ceremony on TV, alone, while Lauren was at the bottom of Cedar Point Lake, while Tom Brennan was being called a hero." The church was silent except for muffled crying. Kyle looked at Lauren's casket, tears streaming down his face. "I never remarried, never moved on. People told me I should, that Lauren would have wanted me to be happy. But how could I move forward when I didn't know what happened to her? Now I know, and I wish I didn't, because living with uncertainty was easier than living with this." Kyle returned to his seat. The pastor spoke about Lauren's short life, about injustice and justice delayed, about a community learning that monsters don't always look like monsters. The burial took place at Lakewood Cemetery. Lauren's casket was lowered into the ground under gray July skies. Her parents, now in their 80s, stood on either side of Kyle, all 3 holding each other upright. As mourners filed past paying respects, Kyle remained motionless, staring at the casket. When everyone had left, when only Kyle and Sheriff Santos remained, Kyle finally spoke. "What happens now? Now Thomas Brennan goes to trial, and you get to tell a jury what his lies cost you." Kyle nodded slowly. "Will that help? Will any of this help?" Santos didn't have a good answer, because the truth was that nothing would help. Lauren was still dead. Kyle had still lost 39 years to grief, and all the justice in the world wouldn't change those facts. The trial of Thomas Brennan began on October 7th, 2024. The courtroom in Madison was packed, with overflow crowds watching via video link. Despite his detailed confession, Wisconsin law required formal proceedings. Brennan's court-appointed attorney, Michael Sterling, had an impossible task. The confession was voluntary, The DNA evidence was irrefutable. The body had been recovered exactly where Brennan said it would be. Sterling's only strategy was emphasizing Brennan's 39 years of service, the lives he'd saved, his genuine remorse. It fell completely flat. Lead prosecutor Jennifer Walsh dismantled that argument methodically. The defendant claims remorse. Let's examine his actions. He murdered Lauren Mitchell. He sank her body in a lake. He helped search for her while knowing exactly where she was. He attended 39 memorials. He comforted her husband while hiding the truth. He received medals for heroism while letting Kyle Mitchell suffer. That's not remorse. That's sustained psychological torture disguised as atonement. The evidence presentation was devastating. The DNA match, the confession video, the letters proving the affair, the journal documenting 39 years of guilt, photographs of the recovery operation, the cement block still attached to Lauren's remains. But the most powerful testimony came from Kyle Mitchell. Now 58 years old, using a cane from decades of stress-related health problems, he spoke for 47 minutes about what Brennan's lies had cost him. I was 19 when Lauren disappeared. I'm 58 now. I've spent more of my life without her than with her. We were married for 3 days, but those 3 days defined everything that came after. I never remarried. People asked why. How could I explain that some part of me was still married to a girl who'd been missing for decades? How could I move forward when I didn't know if she'd suffered, if she'd called for me, if she'd died alone and scared? Kyle's voice broke. He gripped the witness stand, forcing himself to continue. Tom Brennan stood beside me at 39 memorials, put his hand on my shoulder, told me never to give up hope. I trusted him. I respected him. I watched him get the Medal of Valor for saving those kids, and I was happy for him, because I thought he was a good man. I thought he understood grief. Now I know he understood guilt, and he let me suffer for 39 years rather than confess what he'd done. The courtroom was silent. Even Brennan, sitting at the defense table, head down, was crying. Kyle turned to face him directly. I hope you live a long time in prison, Tom. I hope every single day you wake up knowing that those kids you saved will grow up, have families, live full lives. And Lauren won't. Because you killed her when she was 19. Because she threatened to tell me about your affair. That's what her life was worth to you. Protecting your secret. When Kyle returned to his seat, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the judge had to pause to compose herself before calling the next witness. Brennan was given the opportunity to address the court before sentencing. His attorney advised against it. Brennan insisted. He stood, orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame, and looked directly at Kyle. I have no excuse, no justification. Lauren threatened to tell you about our affair, and I panicked. I killed her. Then I spent 39 years being too much of a coward to confess. I thought if I saved enough lives, if I became a hero, somehow it would balance what I'd done. I was wrong. Nothing balances this. I destroyed your life. I destroyed Lauren's life. I destroyed my family. I'm sorry doesn't mean anything, but it's all I have. Kyle stared at Brennan, face carved from stone. When the courtroom fell silent, Kyle spoke a single sentence. I hope Lauren haunts you every night for whatever time you have left. Judge Patricia Morrison delivered the sentence on October 10th, 2024. Her voice carried moral authority that filled the courtroom. Mr. Brennan, you are sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. You took a 19-year-old girl's life because she threatened your secret. You let her husband suffer for 39 years. You received medals and honors while hiding murder. The law provides a range of sentences. You get the maximum. You will die in prison. And when you do, you will be remembered not as a hero, but as a murderer who hid behind a uniform for 4 decades. Court adjourned. Brennan showed no reaction as officers led him from the courtroom in shackles. The man who'd saved lives and taken a life disappeared into the prison system, stripped of everything except the memory of what he'd done and who he'd hurt. Thomas Brennan died in prison on March 3, 2025, 9 months after his conviction. He was 64. The official cause was heart attack, though inmates reported he'd stopped eating weeks earlier, had stopped leaving his cell, had stopped responding when spoken to. He'd simply given up. Kyle Mitchell was notified of Brennan's death by Sheriff Santos. His reaction was a long silence. Then, "Good. I hope he suffered." The Lakewood Fire Department held no memorial for Brennan. His name remained erased from the station. The Medal of Valor was returned to the state. His 40 years of service were acknowledged with a single line in internal records. Thomas Edward Brennan, firefighter, 1982-2007. Fire Chief 2007-2024. Dismissed, convicted of murder. Patricia Brennan and her daughters moved out of state, changed their names, tried to build lives separate from the man who'd destroyed their family. Cedar Point Lake, where Lauren had been hidden for 39 years, was rededicated as Lauren Mitchell Memorial Park. The boat launch was renovated. A memorial plaque was installed describing Lauren's life, not her death, describing who she was, not what had been done to her. Kyle Mitchell attended the dedication ceremony on June 8, 2025, the 40th anniversary of Lauren's death. He stood at the water's edge, alone, staring at the lake that had hidden his wife for so long. Sheriff Santos approached. "How are you doing, Kyle?" Kyle didn't answer immediately. Finally, "I don't know. For 39 years I hoped for answers. Now I have them, and they're worse than anything I imagined. Tom Brennan killed Lauren because she was going to tell me about their affair. That's it. That's the reason. Not a stranger. Not random violence. Just a coward afraid of consequences. At least you have closure." Kyle laughed bitterly. Closure. Everyone keeps using that word. But closure doesn't give me back 39 years. Doesn't let me grow old with Lauren. Doesn't give us the life we should have had. He paused. "I'm 59 years old. I've spent 40 years mourning a marriage that lasted 3 days. And I wouldn't trade those 3 days for anything. Because at least I had them. At least she was real. That's more than Tom Brennan deserved." Kyle Mitchell died peacefully in his sleep on August 14, 2026, at age 60. He was buried beside Lauren in Lakewood Cemetery. At his funeral, Pastor Michaels spoke about a man who'd loved completely, grieved deeply, and remained faithful to a memory for 41 years. Kyle never gave up on Lauren, not when she disappeared, not when years passed without answers, not when everyone told him to move on. He stayed true to a love that began in 8th grade and ended, truly ended, only when his own life ended. That's devotion. That's faithfulness. That's love. The Lakewood Fire Department continues to operate, serving the community as it has for over a century. The scandal of Thomas Brennan has faded, replaced by new stories, new heroes, new controversies. But on June 8th each year, firefighters gather at Lauren Mitchell Memorial Park to remember not just Lauren, but all victims of violence. To remember that heroes and monsters can sometimes be the same person, and to commit themselves to being better than the man who wore their uniform while hiding murder. On warm summer evenings, families gather at Cedar Point Lake. Children play in the water where Lauren was hidden for 39 years. Couples walk the trails where memorials were once held. Life continues, because that's what life does. It continues despite tragedy, despite betrayal, despite justice that comes too late to heal. And somewhere in the water, in the depths where Lauren Mitchell spent 39 years, there's only silence. The silence of a 19-year-old bride who never got to grow old, who never had children, who never became more than a cautionary tale about trusted people and terrible secrets, but who was loved completely and faithfully by a husband who waited 41 years to be reunited with her. That has to mean something. In a world where cold cases often stay cold forever, where killers sometimes die free, where justice is arbitrary and cruel, it has to mean something that Lauren was found, that Brennan was caught, that Kyle got answers, even if those answers brought no peace. Justice came late to Lakewood, but it came. And beneath the water at Cedar Point Lake, where families now swim and children now laugh, there's a memorial plaque that reads simply, Lauren Mitchell, beloved wife, never forgotten, finally home.